Good morning. I'm Cheryl Grazno, and I am going to be talking to you a little bit more about our infants and toddlers. So, birth to 3 programs for some families are the very first contact with formal systems to support them in their parenting journey. Some ISDs operate evidence-based home visiting programs, which purport that if you come into the program and do all the components of the program with fidelity, then you will have better outcomes for children when you are done. Early intervention is an early intervention program that provides individualized supports to families who have infants and toddlers with a disability. Early intervention utilizes evidence-based practices that have been proven to lead to better outcomes for children. Early On often provides services in the home environment and partners with home visiting programs, but it is different than what we typically refer to as a home visiting program. I think I'm going to do this now. Thank you. Okay, so though I have been involved and led a variety of programs over the years, Birth to 3 has always been my foundation, my passion, the place that I call home. Sometimes my peers refer to me as Grandma of Early On because I've been working in this since it's been introduced in the state. I am a grandma to these sweet boys, and so I do see this as an endearing reference, even though it really means that I'm old. Recently, a colleague contacted me wondering if I could remember when we actually started implementing Part C law in Michigan. It was in 1993, by the way. And during the course of this conversation, she suggested that I write a blog about all of my experiences and perspective that I have had in Early On. And so that is what I did, and that is what I'm going to share with you today. So, as we mark the 30th anniversary, it is the perfect time to look back at our beginning and reflect upon where we are and where we want to be. I've had the pleasure of being the Early On coordinator for Ionia ISD since the beginning of this initiative. I attended the very first meeting in Lansing in 1988 when MDE gathered us all together and told us about this new federal law, Public Law 99-457 Part H. Wow. And we are already providing services to children, infants, and toddlers through IEPs. However, this new law was going to be transformational for families and for very young children with disabilities. There's a lot of energy and excitement and hope for something new, something urgent, and something very different on the horizon. At that time, each state agency could place this new federal law, which eventually evolved to Part C of IDEA and Early On as we know it here, in whatever state agency made the most sense. For Michigan, it was placed within the Department of Education as we were already a birth mandate state servicing these children. This meant that unlike most other states, we were already servicing children through our Birth to 3 administrative rules for special education. We definitely got this right as a state. Part C law identifies personnel with specific qualifications to be providers for children with special needs, and for the most part, these federal qualifications mirror what our MARS rules require. We already had the right people in place to do the job. As we talked about this new law, we are very proud as a state of what we were already doing for our infants and toddlers, but we wanted to do more. So each state had the opportunity to define who would be eligible for Part C. We decided that because we had such a great foundation, we could serve more infants and toddlers. So as a state, in addition to our established condition criteria, we determined our eligibility threshold for a child experiencing a developmental delay for Part C would be a 20% delay. We also got this right as a state. I'm sorry, did I hit the wrong button? I did. There we go. We also got this right as a state. Okay, sorry, I didn't get to practice with this. So as a state, in addition to our established conditions, we made the 20% delay. We also got this right. We needed to make our threshold for eligibility for a developmental delay lower than our MARS guidelines, which was set as a 50% delay for eligibility with a developmental delay. Requiring evidence for a child to be half of their age and development before they could have access to early intervention services was, and honestly still is, too consequential in the life of an infant and toddler. While we created this opportunity to serve more children, we didn't adjust our state special education eligibility for children birth to 3 to match our Part C eligibility. There were 4 other birth mandate states in the country, and those states aligned their Part C eligibility with their own state's definition of what it meant to be an infant and toddler with a disability or eligible for special education. We did not get this right, and this has caused a lot of problems as a result. In Michigan, though we had good intentions, we created 2 separate groups of children that are both identified as infants and toddlers with a disability. We are the only state that does this. And we have struggled to serve our early on only eligible children and been confused about where they belong. Is it with special education or is it with general education? There were attempts to even define these children eligible for early on as only at risk and in need of those preventative home visiting programs. Of course, this is contrary to what the Part C law says, and we as a state opted not to define an at-risk population and serve them. So though efforts to serve more children was worthy, there was not a dedicated funding source to support them, nor did we have enough staff to do this. So as a result, we developed our own personnel guidelines, which did not align with MARS rules or Part C law. This was helpful to get more providers in the field, but not necessarily the provider types outlined in the law or the provider types that we needed. We did not get this right. Furthermore, over the years, because we've had these 2 eligibility categories, we have provided our staff considerable flexibility in determining if a child is Part C only or MMSE eligible. In the 10 years since the State Auditor General report cited the Department of Education for not offering special education evaluations to infants and toddlers as a state, we have only increased this rate by about 1%. In 2018, we received our very first state funding for early intervention via our 54D funds. This was definitely a step in the right direction. Early on has been an unfunded mandate for many years, and a state investment in the program is critical. This has allowed expansion of highly qualified personnel, providing evaluations and services to early on eligible children. However, now we are funding 2 systems, early on and special education. Many ISDs are utilizing their state 54D money to buy partial FTEs for special ed certified staff that can work with children who are identified as infants and toddlers with disabilities that meet our Part C definition, because providers that are fully funded by special ed working with identified children through MARS are not supposed to work with children that are not special ed eligible. I hope that sounded confusing to you. Okay. Yeah. And also, if we think about this from the other data point I gave you, that would mean 60% of our children are being served by that other box. So I gave you the QR codes, check out the allocations. There's no way that can happen. Okay, so creating one group of children, all eligible under MARS, would help us improve our equity and access for all children in our system. We would also need to revise our MARS rules for eligibility from a 50% delay to a 25% delay, or if you prefer, we can keep the 20% delay, but a change of 25% would align us with 46 other states. Most importantly, it would capture children who need early intervention and allow them access to high-quality providers and services. We would need to revise our Michigan personnel standards and also the required 72 hours that every child must receive through MARS. The last 30 years implementing early on have indeed been transformational and exciting. We have built upon our strong foundation and aligned with many evidence-based practices such as coaching, using a primary service provider, providing our services through an IFSP, doing routines intervention, providing services in the natural environment, embedding strategies in play, enhancing parent-child interactions, highlighting literacy, and implementing high-quality teaming practices with fidelity, all of which serve to elevate and improve our systems of services. However, we still have some work to do. The way we implement early intervention in our community with 2 different systems is confusing to families. It impacts our child find obligations, it duplicates our staffing needs, it is financially inefficient, and it complicates our advocacy efforts. We can do better. We can get this right by increased funding and making some strategic changes. Michigan's Birth to 3 special education services are the bedrock of our early on system. We do have some rules that are over 30 years old that are worth updating and will lead to a more efficient and equitable system. If we truly want a pre-K for all system, then we need to make sure that we have a robust early intervention system to support children during these critical stages of development. 85% of brain development, friends, happens within the first 3 years of life, and skills beget skills in a complementary and dynamic way. Therefore, focusing in these first 3 years of life is where you're going to get your most effectiveness and efficacy. Though the last 30 years have been extremely fulfilling, the future is what lies ahead. Now, some of you in this room have no idea what this grandma's talking about, and that is okay. But I guarantee you someone near you does. So I want you to find them. And I challenge you to learn more about your own early intervention systems. How does it work? What does your data say? I challenge all of my peers, the early childhood administrators, to engage in reflective conversations with each other, develop deeper understanding of our issues, examine your cultural norms and practices, and advocate for change. I challenge my LEAP and OST to work together collaboratively with the local leaders to explore potential system changes that would make our system more efficient so the next 30 years are even more progressive and impactful for infants and toddlers and their family. I believe we can do it, and they deserve it. Thank you so much for letting me share the early on story.